The morning light filtered through the spotless windows of Brew and Bliss, casting a golden glow across the sleek marble counters and modern rustic decor. But inside, that warmth faded quickly, replaced by the chill of silent competition, hushed judgments, and invisible burdens. This wasn't just a coffee shop. It was a curated space for the elite, where oat milk lattes were more props than beverages, and every seat held whispered ambition. Deals were closed here, curated lifestyles displayed, and every outfit was a silent war cry of relevance. Behind the counter, Emma Martinez briskly wiped the surface for the third time in under an hour. Her movements were mechanical, fast, efficient, but carried the weight of exhaustion that no amount of caffeine could ease. At 26, Emma wore a smile that could brighten any room, the kind of radiant charm customers noticed and strangers remembered. But today, that smile was held together by threads of willpower. Tucked deep inside her apron was a crumpled pile of unpaid bills, their weight heavier than any coffee tray. Rent was 3 days overdue. Her mother's prescriptions were more expensive this month. And her car? That grating metallic groan it made when starting was the same sound her hope made now. Strained, uncertain, fading. "Emma, stop daydreaming and focus," barked Tanya Richardson, her voice sharp enough to cut through the din of espresso machines and clinking cups. Tanya was everything Emma wasn't. Impeccably styled, fiercely composed, and cold in a way that only came from years of standing on others to stay elevated. At 32, Tanya had fought her way into the manager's seat, not with heart, but with strategy. She knew how to charm the wealthy clientele, to make them feel just a notch above the rest. Every detail of her appearance was curated. Platinum blonde waves, flawless makeup, and designer clothes that made her look untouchable. She didn't manage Brew and Bliss, she reigned over it, every employee a silent subject in her kingdom. "Sorry, Tanya," Emma replied, forcing the practiced smile to return like a mask fitted too tightly. Around her, the rest of the staff moved like shadows. Jake, the barista, pretended his world began and ended at the espresso machine. Sarah, the other waitress, was obsessively rearranging pastries already lined with surgical precision. The air buzzed with tension, dressed up as professionalism. Then the door opened with a gentle chime, and everything shifted. A man stepped inside. Mid-50s, maybe older, with hair that looked like it hadn't been trimmed in months. His jeans were faded, patched at the knees. His flannel shirt was well worn, and his sneakers had crossed many hard miles. Every inch of him told a quiet story of hardship. He walked with hesitation, carrying an air of someone who knew too well how the world often looked through him. The energy in the cafe curdled. Conversations didn't stop, they just sank into quieter tones. Eyes followed him with the subtle intensity reserved for looming threats or unfortunate sights. Nobody said anything, but the judgment was deafening. He stood there for a moment, near the entrance, scanning the room with patient, searching eyes, and though he made no move to interrupt anyone, his presence was enough to make the polished surfaces feel less pristine. Tanya was on Emma's side in seconds, her heels clicking like gunshots on the tile floor. Her manicured hand gripped Emma's arm, her voice low and laced with venom. "Do you see what just walked in?" she hissed. "This is exactly what we need to avoid. Our regulars don't come here to be reminded of the real world." Emma glanced toward the man, who now looked quietly confused, as if unsure whether he should approach or retreat. "Is just a customer, Tanya. Maybe he's a vagrant," Tanya snapped. "Look at him. That hair, those clothes, the way he's hovering like he's about to ask for a handout. This is Brew and Bliss, not a damn soup kitchen." Emma's gaze met the man's across the room, and in that brief second something passed between them. Quiet, human, aching. It wasn't pity. It wasn't fear. It was dignity. Tattered, but intact. He didn't expect kindness anymore, But maybe, just maybe, he still hoped for it. Tanya's grip on her arm tightened. Do not look at him. Do not serve him. Do not encourage him. He'll get the message and leave. That's what's best for everyone. Emma's chest tightened. Something inside her, something quiet and rebellious, stirred. But what if he has money? What if he just wants... I'm not asking Emma. Tanya's voice dropped lower, deadlier. I'm telling you, we have a reputation to uphold and he doesn't fit in it. Do I make myself clear? Around them, the other staff members averted their eyes, pretending not to notice, but their stillness betrayed their compliance. Silent nods, avoidant glances. They'd received the same silent order. Erase this man with indifference. Emma stood frozen, her heart thudding against a truth she didn't want to carry. Sometimes cruelty wore perfume and smiled politely. Everyone seemed to find something incredibly pressing to do, anything to avoid looking at the man now standing at the counter. Jake stared at the espresso machine like it held the meaning of life. Sarah suddenly became obsessed with adjusting croissants by millimeters, her back rigid with purposeful distraction. Even the customers, once chatty and absorbed in their own little worlds, now became part of a quiet conspiracy of neglect, pretending not to see what was happening. But Emma couldn't look away. The man moved with the careful grace of someone who had long practiced how to exist without being seen. He approached the counter with a kind of quiet courage, his every step measured to take up as little space as possible. He waited there, politely, silently, until the stillness became uncomfortable. Then, with a voice soft but firm, he said, "Excuse me. I'd like to order something, if that's possible." The words should have been ordinary, but in the sterile quiet of calculated indifference, they landed like a stone in still water. Tanya turned her head slowly toward him, her eyes narrowing. Then, as if she had suddenly donned a different mask, she flashed a sugary smile, so artificial it practically crackled. "I'm sorry," she said, voice dipped in condescension, "but we're terribly busy this morning. You might find yourself more comfortable at the McDonald's down the street." The venom in her tone was delivered with such effortlessness it was chilling. She might have been suggesting a wine to pair with a croissant. Except this wasn't hospitality. It was a dismissal. A humiliation dressed in civility. The man didn't flinch. His expression barely shifted. But Emma saw it. A tiny flicker in his eyes. Not anger. Something sadder. More familiar. A kind of emotional fatigue born from being brushed aside too many times. "I understand you're busy," he said with remarkable calm. "I'm happy to wait. I just wanted a cup of coffee, maybe a seat to rest for a little while." Tanya's smile tightened. "As I said, McDonald's might be more your speed. We're quite upscale here, and I'd hate for you to be surprised by the prices." And that's when something inside Emma broke. Not with rage, but with clarity. It was a rupture from a long pressure of witnessing cruelty disguised as professionalism. Maybe it was her own experiences. Those days she felt invisible, those nights she cried over bills and broken dreams. Or maybe it was the voice of her mother, echoing through time. Kindness costs nothing, but it means everything. She stepped forward without hesitation. "Hi there," she said warmly, gently pushing past Tanya. "I'm Emma. I'd be happy to help you find something you'd enjoy." Relief washed across the man's face so suddenly and deeply that it nearly took her breath away. "Thank you," he replied simply. "That's very kind of you." Tanya's eyes burned with fury, but Emma had already moved on, guiding the man to the smallest table in the cafe. It was half hidden by a pillar, away from the Instagram-perfect lighting. But it was clean. It was his. "What can I get you?" she asked, with real curiosity. The man introduced himself as Mr. Ray. He scanned the menu with reverence, as if each item might be a small luxury not taken for granted. "A regular coffee would be wonderful," he said. "Black, if that's all right." "Of course," Emma smiled. "Would you like something to eat? We have great pastries on the house if you'd like a suggestion." "Just the coffee," he said, eyes soft with gratitude. "But thank you for asking." Back at the counter, Emma prepared his drink with extra care, pouring from a fresh batch and placing it on a clean saucer. When she returned, she saw something curious. Mr. Ray had pulled out a small black notebook and was writing in it with deliberate strokes. His eyes darted across the cafe, quiet but intensely observant. "Here you go," she said gently. "Let me know if you need anything else." He looked up, closing the notebook just enough to offer her a smile, his first genuine one. It lit up his face, erasing years of wear in an instant. "You're very kind, Emma, thank you." As Emma turned back toward the counter, she could practically feel the heat of Tanya's glare sizzling against her skin. She knew there would be consequences for what she'd just done. But seeing Mr. Ray there, settled quietly, treated like a person rather than a problem, she didn't regret a thing. What Emma didn't know was that Mr. Ray was far more than he appeared. Behind that humble demeanor was a razor-sharp mind. Every word, every glance, every subtle cruelty was being recorded in that little black notebook. And from those pages a plan was quietly blooming. One that would soon turn the polished world of brew and bliss upside down. The cafe hummed with its usual rhythm, but the energy had shifted. Like the tension before a storm, a silent line had been drawn, and whether they knew it or not, everyone had chosen a side. Mr. Ray sipped his coffee slowly, his eyes catching every detail. He noticed how Tanya moved like a commander surveying her domain, how the staff maneuvered around her like frightened soldiers, how customers were treated differently depending on how they looked or what they wore. Emma, though, she kept checking in on him, discreetly but consistently, not to flatter, not to perform, just to make sure he was okay. He took note of that too. An hour passed like a slow march through a minefield. Emma could feel Tanya's eyes tracking her every move, waiting for a misstep. The manager stalked the cafe floor with calculated intent, her heels a staccato rhythm of suppressed rage. But Mr. Ray remained steady in his corner, quiet, reflective, collecting truths like puzzle pieces. Then Emma noticed his coffee was nearly gone. Without pause, she grabbed the pot and made her way to his table. "Would you like a refill?" she asked, already pouring with a soft smile. "That would be wonderful," Mr. Ray replied, sincerity in his voice. "You know, I've been to a lot of places, but rarely have I been treated this thoughtfully." Emma's smile deepened. "Just trying to treat you how I'd want to be treated." She didn't see Tanya approaching. "Emma." The name cracked like a whip. Conversations froze, forks stopped mid-air. Even the espresso machine fell silent. Emma turned, coffee pot in hand. "I was just offering Mr. Ray a refill." "Mr. Ray?" Tanya's voice sharpened to a blade. "We're on a first-name basis with vagrants now?" The word poisoned the air. Emma saw Mr. Ray's jaw tighten, barely, but his expression remained composed. Around them, phones began to rise, sensing drama, people ready to record. "He's a paying customer," Emma said, trying to keep her voice steady. "You were just undermining my authority," Tanya snapped. "Parading around like Mother Teresa, handing out refills to people who clearly don't belong here." The words slammed into Emma like waves. Her cheeks burned. She could see Jake the barista wincing with sympathy, Sarah scrubbing spotless surfaces with desperate intensity. Even some customers looked uncomfortable, but no one stepped in. "I'm sorry, Tanya," Emma said quietly. "I was just trying to provide good service." "Good service?" Tanya laughed bitterly. You clearly don't understand how this business works. This cafe thrives because we create an environment our clients expect, not this. She gestured at Mr. Ray like he was clutter on a perfectly set table. Emma's heart cracked wide open. All he did was order coffee. And somehow, that was enough to unravel the cruel order of this place. "He's not bothering anyone," Emma said, louder this time, her voice steadier, anchored by conviction rather than fear. "He's bothering me," Tanya snapped back, every syllable sharp with disdain. "And more importantly, he's bothering our real customers. Look around, Emma. Really look." Emma hesitated, then turned her gaze toward the cafe. Her stomach tightened. Tanya wasn't entirely wrong. At least on the surface, some patrons were shifting uncomfortably. A few had moved to different tables. Others whispered quietly, eyes flicking back and forth between Mr. Ray and the confrontation unfolding before them. But what hit Emma hardest wasn't the discomfort of the crowd. It was the expression on Mr. Ray's face. He didn't look angry. He didn't even look surprised. He looked tired, bone-deep, soul-worn tired, like someone who had rehearsed this scene in his head 1,000 times and now watched it play out, frame by familiar frame. The day dragged on, each moment saturated with tension. Emma moved through her shift like she was navigating a minefield, every smile forced, every movement careful. But whenever her eyes drifted to that quiet corner, to Mr. Ray still sitting with his notebook and coffee, something inside her softened. During a lull in the afternoon rush, she slipped away from the counter and approached his table. In her hand, a blueberry muffin, one of the Dales that would be tossed by closing time. "On the house," she whispered, placing it gently before him. "You said you hadn't eaten today." His eyes widened, not at the muffin, but at the gesture. And there, just behind the shock, something shimmered. Emotion. Maybe even gratitude. "You didn't have to," he murmured. "I wanted to," Emma said, quietly but firmly. "Everyone deserves kindness." What she didn't see was the cold, electronic eye watching from above. In the cramped office behind the kitchen, Tanya leaned back in her chair, the footage replaying on a security monitor, her lips curled in a tight, vindictive smile. 20 minutes later, Emma was summoned. The office smelled like burnt coffee and suppressed fury. "Sit," Tanya ordered without looking up from her paperwork. Emma obeyed, her hands clenched in her lap, bracing herself for impact. "You gave him food," Tanya began, her tone unnervingly calm. "It was just a muffin." "That's not the point," Tanya exploded, slamming her pen down. "The point is, you directly disobeyed me. You embarrassed me. You made me look weak in front of staff and customers." She slid a piece of paper across the desk, a printed disciplinary form. Below the text, a blank space waited for a signature. "You're going to write an apology," Tanya said. "A formal, written apology for your insubordination and unprofessional behavior, and tomorrow morning you're going to read it aloud, in front of the entire staff." Emma stared at the page. Her fingers trembled. She was being ordered to apologize. For being decent. For showing compassion. "For getting your place," Tanya said, her voice turning icy. "You're a waitress, not a charity director, not a crusader. You don't get to decide how this cafe operates. You take orders. From customers and from me." Emma looked into her manager's eyes and saw it clearly now. This wasn't about coffee. This was about control. About keeping power intact by keeping kindness in check. "And if I refuse?" she asked. Tanya leaned back with a smirk. "Then you can clean out your locker. Your choice. You've got until tomorrow morning." As Emma walked out, the crumpled form shaking in her hand, she caught sight of Mr. Ray, still in his corner, still writing in that mysterious notebook. When their eyes met, he gave her the smallest nod she'd ever seen, but it carried more encouragement than any pep talk ever could. Something was coming, and it wasn't going to be small. That night, Emma barely slept. The disciplinary form sat on her nightstand like a threat wrapped in paper. Her thoughts ran in anxious circles. Rent, bills, her mother's medication, her car's looming breakdown. Every reason to keep her head down screamed at her, but her conscience whispered something louder. Dignity. By morning, she still hadn't decided. When she arrived for her shift, the cafe was unusually crowded. A restless tension buzzed in the air. Emma tied her apron with shaking hands, her chest tight with dread. And then she saw him. Mr. Ray. Same flannel, same humble sneakers, same quiet grace. Emma's heart dropped. She hadn't wanted him to return, not because she didn't welcome him, but because his presence meant the decision would be made for her. The line was about to be crossed. Tanya spotted him too. Emma saw the shift in her posture, like a predator catching scent of a threat. The smile vanished, her face contorted with disbelief and rage. "You've got to be kidding me," she muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Give them an inch." Mr. Ray approached the counter with his usual poise. "Good morning," he said calmly. "I'd like a coffee, please." The room fell silent. Phones came out. Emma could see red recording lights. The cafe had become a stage. "Absolutely not," Tanya snapped, stepping forward. "I made myself clear. This establishment is not appropriate for your situation." "I'm sorry," Mr. Ray asked, his tone still respectful, but with a trace of steel. "Oh, I think you understand perfectly," Tanya said, voice rising. "You're trying to manipulate my employees. But I'm done. This is a business, not a charity." Emma stepped forward before she could stop herself. "Tanya, please." "No, Emma," Tanya barked, whirling on her. "We had this conversation yesterday, and now you've made your choice." She turned back to Mr. Ray, her voice booming. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Our clientele expect a certain atmosphere, and your presence is making them uncomfortable." Emma looked around. Some customers were uncomfortable, but not because of Mr. Ray. Because of this scene, this cruelty. "I haven't done anything wrong," Mr. Ray said. "You're not welcome here," Tanya replied. "Jake, call security." Emma stepped between them, her voice cracking through the silence. "You can't do this." Tanya's eyes blazed. "Step aside. You're already in trouble." "No." Emma stood her ground. "This is wrong. This is cruel, and I won't be part of it." The cafe had gone completely still. Emma felt the phones aimed at her, heard the silence press against her skin. "I had just wanted to be treated like a person," she said. "He was polite. He paid. The only one disturbing this cafe is you." Tanya's face flushed deep red. "How dare you speak to me like that? How dare you treat another human being like garbage?" Emma shot back. "I don't care what he looks like. He deserves basic respect." "That's it," Tanya seethed. "Emma Martinez, you're fired. Security's on their way. I want both of you out." Emma felt the words hit like a physical strike. Fired. Fired. The rent. The medication. Her future. But she looked at Mr. Ray, and she didn't regret a thing. And then he spoke. "Your cafe?" he said. His voice steady but suddenly different. "Excuse me?" Tanya asked. Mr. Ray pulled out his phone, calmly scrolled, then made a call. "Yes, this is Ray Morrison," he said clearly, voice carrying across the cafe. "I need an immediate meeting with HR and legal regarding a serious situation at the Brew and Bliss flagship location." Emma's heart skipped. Ray Morrison. That name. Tanya's face drained of color. Who are you calling? Ray Morrison ended the call, tucked his phone away, and turned to her. The next sentence would change everything. You might want to rethink that dismissal, Mr. Ray said, his voice calm but resonating with quiet authority. In fact, you might want to rethink a lot of things. The silence that followed was absolute. It felt like the whole world had pressed pause. Emma could hear the tension in every breath, see it in every wide-eyed stare. The entire cafe had become a stage, and every person in it knew they were witnessing a moment that would be remembered long after the coffee got cold. Tanya let out a nervous laugh, sharp, jittery, disbelieving. It started as a chuckle and quickly unraveled into something bordering on hysteria. Ray Morrison, she repeated, the words soaked in sarcasm. Oh, come on. What's next? You're going to tell me you're the Queen of England. But her voice wobbled, and Emma noticed the shift. The atmosphere had changed. Jake stood frozen behind the espresso machine, pale as porcelain. Sarah stared, her mouth hanging open in complete shock. The customers, once aloof and self-involved, were now whispering urgently. Phones were out. Eyes darted between Mr. Ray and Tanya. Emma caught snatches of conversation. Wait, did he say Morrison, as in Morrison Capital Group? Didn't they just acquire? No way. Oh my God, I think this is real. Emma's chest tightened. That name. Ray Morrison. Where had she heard it before? You think this is a joke? Tanya snapped, her voice rising with desperation. You walk in here, disrupt my staff, manipulate my employees, and now what? You expect me to believe you're some billionaire in disguise? Mr. Ray nodded. He said, nothing. Instead, he calmly reached into his jacket and pulled out a sleek leather portfolio. From it, he removed several official-looking documents and laid them on a nearby table. 3 weeks ago, he said, voice clear and deliberate, Morrison Capital Group acquired a controlling interest in the Brew and Bliss franchise. 68% to be exact. The words dropped like a depth charge. Emma felt like the floor had shifted beneath her feet. Morrison Capital Group. The name was suddenly everywhere in her memory. The business section her mother sometimes read aloud. The headlines about acquisitions, corporate reform, and company overhauls. This man, this quiet, unassuming man, was the one steering it all. Tanya's mouth flapped soundlessly. That's impossible, she stammered. The new owners haven't even introduced themselves. They haven't, Ray finished, a sad smile tugging at his lips. Because I chose to come in first, quietly. I needed to see what I was really buying before I started making changes. He gestured around the cafe. His tone shifted, still calm but firmer now. We've been receiving complaints, online reviews citing discrimination, employee feedback about toxic culture, patrons saying they felt unwelcome. I wanted to find out if those were isolated issues or signs of something deeper. Emma stood frozen, her thoughts racing. The man she had served coffee and muffins to wasn't just a customer. He was the one holding the power to dismantle the entire system, and he had chosen to observe, not from a boardroom, but from within. I came undercover, Ray said, his eyes meeting hers again, soft but resolute. I wanted to see how your team treated someone who didn't fit the image of your typical clientele. I wanted to understand the values being practiced here. He picked up one of the documents and held it up. Legal seals, signatures, a corporate logo stamped at the top. Withdraw. These are the acquisition papers, he said, and my authorization to make immediate staffing changes. Tanya stared at the documents like they were radioactive. But you can't be, she whispered. You look like someone who doesn't belong in your perfectly polished little world. Ray's voice was gentle but cut like glass, like someone whose appearance doesn't earn your respect. That's the real problem, Tanya. That's what I came here to see for myself. Emma suddenly understood. The notebook, the intense observation. He hadn't been a wanderer seeking a seat. He'd been conducting the most brutally honest audit imaginable. The call I made earlier, Ray said, was to my HR director and our legal counsel. They'll be here shortly to begin confidential interviews with each staff member about the management practices they've witnessed. He turned, fully facing Tanya now. The weight of his authority bore down like a gavel. I've seen enough to know that change isn't just necessary, it's overdue. Tanya scrambled to grab the documents, flipping through them with trembling hands. Her voice cracked as she spoke. These could be fake. Anyone can print this stuff. This could all be some elaborate scam. Her phone buzzed, then buzzed again, then rang. She looked down. Her skin turned a ghostly shade. It's corporate, she whispered. I'd answered that, Ray said quietly. She fumbled with the phone, her hands shaking so hard she nearly dropped it. Hello? She said, voice fragile. Yes, this is Tanya Richardson. No, Yes, he's here, I understand. Yes, sir, immediately. She hung up, the device slipping slightly in her grip. They were the regional director, she said, barely breathing. He confirmed everything. The cafe erupted in whispers. Phones captured every moment. Emma heard someone near the back say, "This'll be all over TikTok by tonight." Ray turned back to her, his expression changing entirely, gentle, warm, and deeply sincere. "Emma," he said, "your termination is void, effective immediately." She blinked, stunned. "Wait, what?" "In fact," he continued, "I'd like to offer you a new role. Interim manager, while we conduct a full operations review." Her breath caught in her throat. The room spun. She couldn't speak. "You've shown grace under pressure," he said. "Decency in the face of cruelty. That's the kind of leadership this place needs." Emma's heart was pounding now, not from fear, but from a swell of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. She glanced around at the staff, the customers, the faces of strangers who had all become witnesses to this transformation. And for the first time in days, maybe weeks, she smiled. Not a forced customer service grin, but a real, wide, grateful smile. Because sometimes, when the world pushes you to your knees, standing tall means everything. And sometimes, the man everyone overlooks is the one who holds the power to change everything. Emma's mouth fell open. What? But I'm just a waitress." "No," Ray said, his tone steady, unwavering. "You're someone who sees people as people. And in my experience, that's the single most important qualification for leadership." He didn't need to raise his voice. Every word carried weight. This cafe doesn't just serve coffee. It serves a community, or, at least, it should, and you reminded everyone of that today. His gaze swept the room, locking eyes with each staff member, then the guests still watching, their phones still filming. There was no denying the truth anymore. This quiet, unassuming man had just unraveled years of toxic culture with a few words and a notebook. And now he was handing Emma the chance to be part of what came next. "You've just saved this place from becoming everything I never wanted it to be," he said, turning back to her. "Now the question is, are you willing to help fix it?" The next 30 minutes unfolded like a carefully orchestrated demolition. Emma, stunned and dazed, stood near the counter, trying to grasp how she had gone from being publicly fired to being offered the position of interim manager. Around her, Brew and Bliss was cracking open, exposing the rot beneath the marble countertops and artisan Ray's HR director, a sharply composed woman named Margaret Chin, arrived like a precision-guided missile. Two legal associates followed closely behind. Without pause, they converted the back office into a mobile interview center. Tanya was the first to be summoned, escorted with stiff posture and eyes flickering with fear. Through the thin walls, Emma could hear snippets, Tanya's voice rising, Margaret's calm responses, the sound of a narrative unraveling. "This is insane," Jake whispered beside her. "I knew Tanya was cold, but I'd never imagined." "Did you know who he was?" Sarah asked, voice hushed and shaky. Emma shook her head, still in disbelief. "I just thought he was a kind man who deserved kindness." "Well," Sarah murmured, "that kind man is now our boss." As if on cue, Ray returned. He had rolled up his sleeves, the formality gone, but his presence was even more commanding. He stood at the center of the cafe like someone who didn't just own the place. He cared about it. "I'd like to speak to everyone," he began, his voice clear and unhurried. "While Margaret continues her interviews, I want to offer assurance. If you haven't contributed to discriminatory or unethical practices, your jobs are safe. In fact, I'm hoping most of you will stay." A visible ripple of relief moved through the room. "But I also want to hear your stories. Not just what happened today, but what's been happening behind the scenes, weeks, months, even years." And the floodgates opened. Jake went first, shoulders hunched, eyes on the floor. "We all knew Tanya's behavior was wrong," he admitted. "But questioning her meant risking everything. In this economy—" "She had a notebook," Sarah chimed in, voice steadier now. "She tracked everything. If you gave too many napkins, if you spent too much time with a customer she didn't like, if you smiled at the wrong people." Emma stood rooted to the spot, heartbreaking as the truth poured out. The elderly woman scolded for taking too long to decide. The teen boy scrutinized because of his thrift store jacket. The single mother of 3 told she was ruining the ambiance. Jake added, she had a system. A-listers got free pastries and warm smiles. B-listers got okay service. And the rest? He looked toward Mr. Ray. They got what you got. Ray didn't speak. He just listened, his face growing darker with each revelation. "What about corporate oversight?" Margaret asked, stepping out of the office, arms full of notes. Sarah glanced around, then answered, "Tanya was corporate to us. She told us that exclusivity was part of the brand, that complaints about certain types of customers just meant we were doing something right." Emma's stomach turned. "That is absolutely not company policy," Ray said sharply, "and it never will be while I'm in charge." Margaret approached him, her tone clipped and urgent. "We need to talk." As they stepped away, Emma glanced around the cafe. The gleaming light fixtures, once symbols of sophistication, now looked like props in a performance. The pristine arrangement of tables, the manicured minimalism. It all felt empty, hollow, designed to impress, not to welcome. When Ray returned, his face was set with purpose. "Effective immediately," he announced. "Tanya Richardson is no longer employed by Brew and Bliss. Her access has been revoked. She has been escorted from the premises." A collective exhale swept through the room. Emma realized she'd been holding her breath for hours. "We're also launching a full audit of our hiring and training practices," Ray continued. "Every staff member will receive updated training on customer service, anti-discrimination, and what it means to build a truly welcoming space." Then he turned to Emma. "I meant what I said about the interim manager position," he said. "You've shown leadership, integrity, and above all, humanity." Emma's voice cracked as she spoke. "But I didn't go to school for this. I'm just—" "You're the most qualified person in this room," Ray interrupted. "You understand that dignity isn't earned. It's owed. That's not something we can train. It's something you live." He looked around once more, at the staff, the decor, the lingering energy. This cafe tried to erase Emma's kindness, he said, his voice rising slightly. Instead, we're going to build everything around it. This is the beginning of something better. The only question is, who's ready to be part of it? Every hand in the cafe went up. Without hesitation. 6 weeks later, Emma stood in front of the newly redesigned Brew and Bliss. The sign above the door had been updated, but that wasn't the biggest change. Inside, the walls were warmer, not just in color, but in feeling. There were handwritten thank you notes framed on the wall. A pay it forward board hung near the register. Free coffee refills came standard. Everyone was welcome. She looked down at the gold-embossed name badge on her chest. Emma Martinez, manager. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't just feel seen. She felt proud. Because sometimes standing up costs you everything. And sometimes it gives you more than you ever thought possible. What had once been her workplace prison was now a sanctuary of connection. The cold, sterile luxury was gone, replaced by warm earth tones, inviting mismatched furniture, and walls proudly adorned with vibrant local artwork. It didn't just look different, it felt different. It breathed. Just inside the door, a chalkboard in handwritten script read, "Everyone welcome, no exceptions." It hadn't happened overnight. The viral videos of Tanya's downfall had lit the internet on fire, racking up millions of views, igniting hashtags like Brew Bliss Justice, and sparking global conversations about discrimination in customer service. People shared their own painful stories of being judged for their clothes, their accents, their perceived worth. But instead of shrinking away from the scrutiny, Ray had leaned in. He used the spotlight to declare a bold vision. Brew and Bliss would no longer be a symbol of exclusivity. It would become a blueprint for community-first hospitality. And that vision was already coming to life. As Emma unlocked the cafe doors that morning, keys jangling softly in her hand, she still couldn't quite believe it. She, once just a tired waitress with bills in her apron and doubt in her chest, was now the one holding the keys to it all. Inside, the staff meeting buzzed with energy. Jake, now head barista, was walking 2 new hires through the espresso machine. One of them, Marcus, was a formerly homeless veteran Emma had recruited personally. Sarah, with her laser-sharp organizational skills, had stepped into the role of assistant manager. "All right, everyone," Emma called, her voice still carrying that quiet note of disbelief. "Let's review this week's outreach updates before we open." The changes Ray initiated had gone far beyond lattes and muffins. Every morning, unsold pastries were delivered to local shelters. The cafe had partnered with a community college to offer barista training for people re-entering the workforce. And perhaps most impactful, customers could now pay it forward, buying meals or drinks anonymously for anyone in need. "We've got 12 prepaid meals waiting to be used," Sarah reported, scanning her tablet. "And the literacy program starts Tuesday." Emma smiled, remembering Ray's words. A cafe should be a gathering place for everyone, not just those who can afford $15.00 sandwiches. The door chimed as the first customer of the day arrived. Mrs. Rodriguez, the gentle older woman who had once been made to feel like an outsider simply for speaking Spanish. "Buenos dias, Mrs. Rodriguez," Marcus called from behind the counter, already preparing her usual. "Café con leche, right?" Her face lit up with joy. "Sí, por favor." Emma's chest warmed as she watched the exchange. Marcus had been sleeping in his car when she hired him. Now, thanks to the employee housing assistance Ray had implemented, he had a studio apartment and a stable life again. The morning rush swelled. But unlike the robotic pace of Tanya's regime, this crowd lingered. Conversations bloomed. Laughter echoed. It wasn't just a cafe. It was a community. Emma's phone buzzed. A message from Ray. Board meeting at 2 p.m. Bring the quarterly numbers. You're going to love this. Her stomach fluttered. The quarterly review would determine more than just performance. It would decide her future. At precisely 2:00, she entered what used to be Tanya's oversized office, now converted into a modest but elegant conference room. Ray stood at the head of the table, sleeves rolled, flanked by Margaret Chin and two other corporate leaders. "Emma," he said with a grin, gesturing to the chair beside him. "Please, sit. We have something important to discuss." Her palms were damp as she sat. She tried to read their expressions, calm, expectant, maybe even proud. Ray began. "This quarter, Brew & Bliss at this location posted the best numbers in its history. Revenue is up 43%, customer satisfaction, highest it's ever been, and not a single discrimination complaint." Emma's heart swelled. "But that's not why we're here," Ray continued, sliding a document across the table. "Emma, I'd like to offer you something more than a job. I want to offer you ownership." Her breath caught. She looked down at the document. Bold at the top. "Partnership agreement." 20%, Ray said. "You've proven that compassion isn't just the right thing to do. It's good business. You've rebuilt this place from the soul outward." Emma's eyes blurred with tears. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," came Sarah's voice from the doorway, where the entire staff had gathered. "We all voted," Jake added, beaming. "If anyone deserves to have their name on this cafe, it's you." Emma turned, looking at the faces of her team, her family. They weren't just employees, they were the heart of this place. Through the windows, the cafe was alive with energy, people smiling, talking, writing, dreaming. She picked up the pen Ray offered and signed her name, her hands steady, her heart full. Outside, workers were installing a new sign. It read, "Brew & Bliss, Emma's Place, where everyone belongs." The cafe that had once tried to erase her had become her legacy instead.